The Galactic Council chamber was designed to inspire awe. A colossal sphere of transparent alloy floated above a gas giant's atmosphere. Its walls lined with towering platforms where representatives of hundreds of civilizations observed the affairs of the galaxy. Normally the chamber buzzed with arguments, negotiations, and political theater. Today, it was silent. A massive holographic projection filled the center of the chamber. Blue-green world rotated slowly in the void. Elyndara, a small oceanic planet located at the outer edge of the Orion expanse. A peaceful world, a defenseless world, and, today, a doomed one. Around the planet, a fleet of warships formed a tightening ring. Sleek, black vessels shaped like jagged spears of obsidian. Every ship bore the same symbol burned into its hull, a crimson spiral claw. The unmistakable mark of the Varkari Dominion, a ruthless expansionist empire whose reputation was whispered across the stars with a mixture of fear and dread. One of the council delegates, a tall, crystalline being from the Larith Cliff, spoke quietly. They had begun deployment of planetary bombardment platforms. The hologram zoomed closer. Massive mechanical structures unfolded from the Varkari warships. Long barrels extended like metallic talons pointing toward the planet below. Energy readings began. Climbing. Another counselor asked the question everyone feared. Have the Elyndari responded to the Dominion's ultimatum? A data drone answered. They have refused to surrender their planet's Ethereum crystal reserves. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Elyndari were known across the galaxy as gentle scholars and ocean dwellers. Their cities were grown from living coral towers rising above crystal seas. They had never waged war, never conquered anyone, but beneath their oceans lay Ethereum, one of the rarest energy crystals in known space, and the Varkari wanted it. The Dominion had given the Elyndari a simple choice: surrender the crystals, or be erased. The Elyndari chose dignity. The Dominion chose annihilation. A digital timer appeared in the hologram. Orbital bombardment begins in 10 minutes. No fleet stood between the Elyndari and extinction, and the Galactic Council was powerless. Far below the watching eyes of the galaxy, the skies of Elyndara were strangely beautiful. 3 pale moons hung above a calm ocean that shimmered with turquoise light. Floating cities drifted across the water like living gardens. Normally, the air would be filled with music, children playing, scholars debating philosophy beside the crystal reefs. But today, fear had replaced peace. High above the ocean, within the ancient temple city of Literal, the Elyndari elders gathered. Their forms were slender and luminous, their skin faintly glowing like bioluminescent coral. One elder stood at the edge of a balcony overlooking the sea. Her name was Hale, and she remembered something most of her people had nearly forgotten. 30-7 years ago, humans had fallen from the sky. She could still see it clearly in her mind. The broken ship, the wounded strangers the moment their species made a choice. A younger Elyndari approached her. Elder Ash, the Varkar weapons are charging. Ashale nodded slowly. Yes. Should we send another surrender message? Ashale looked toward the sky. Where distant black warships glimmered like predators circling prey. No. Her voice was gentle, but firm. Kindness does not require survival to be meaningful. The younger one hesitated. But, Elder, we will die. Ashale closed her eyes for a moment. Perhaps. Then she whispered quietly, but I still believe the galaxy remembers. Kindness. On board the Varkari flagship, Dread Sovereign, Commander Zerathi watched the planet through a panoramic viewing screen. His species resembled towering insectoid warriors with armored chitin and glowing yellow eyes. Zerathi felt nothing as he studied the peaceful world below. To him, Elyndara was not a civilization. It was a resource deposit. He turned to a subordinate. Status of the bombardment platforms: fully charged. Commander: excellent. Another officer suddenly stiffened. Commander: we are detecting hyperspace disturbances. Zerath's mandibles clicked. How many ships? The officer hesitated. Uncertain. Zerathi frowned. Clarify. Multiple signatures, emerging simultaneously. A second later, space itself began to ripple like the surface of a disturbed lake. Then reality tore open. The first ship emerged from hyperspace, like a silver titan. Its hull stretched nearly 3 kilometers long. Angular armor plates gleamed beneath the distant starlight. Then another ship appeared. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of vessels materialized. Then hundreds. The Varkari sensors screamed warnings. Fleet formations instantly shifted into combat readiness. But the arriving ships did not attack immediately. Instead, They spread into a perfect defensive perimeter around Elyndara, and when the Galactic Council zoomed in on the insignia painted across their hulls, a shockwave of whispers spread through the chamber. The symbol was ancient, a blue sphere surrounded by stars, a mark few had seen in decades. The insignia of the Terran Defense Fleet. Humanity. A council delegate spoke softly. I thought humans withdrew from this region 30 years ago. Another replied quietly. They did, but apparently, they were watching. 37 years earlier, the human colony ship Aurora drifted helplessly through deep space. Its engines had exploded during a catastrophic malfunction. Life support systems flickered. Hull fractures exposed parts of the vessel to vacuum. Inside the command deck, Captain Elias Ward stared at the damage report scrolling across his console. Fuel reserves. Empty. Food supplies. Less than 3 days. Long-range scanners detected something worse. Pirate vessels closing in. Ward leaned back in his chair. His crew of colonists, families, scientists, dreamers had left Earth, hoping to build a new future. Now their journey would end in darkness. Then the sensor officer gasped, "Captain!" Unknown ships approaching. Ward prepared himself for pirates. But the ships arriving were small, delicate. Their hulls shimmered like living crystal. They belonged to the Elyndari. Ward expected suspicion, fear, perhaps even hostility. Instead, the Elyndari opened their hangars and welcomed the broken human ship for weeks. The Elyndari cared for the stranded humans. They repaired the Aurora Reach. Piece by piece, they shared their food stores, their homes, their technology. And when pirate raiders finally arrived to claim the helpless colony ship, the Elyndari did something extraordinary. They defended the humans, not with powerful weapons, but with clever strategy. Their small fleet lured the pirates into an asteroid field, where hidden defense drones destroyed the attackers. When the Aurora Reach was finally ready to depart, Captain Ward stood beside Elder Ashel on a quiet shoreline. Bioluminescent waves rolled gently across the beach. Ward spoke softly. "You saved every person on my ship." Ashel tilted her head. "Kindness is rarely complicated." Ward hesitated. "We don't have anything valuable to repay you." Ashel smiled gently. "You already have." Ward frowned. "How?" "You reminded us that courage still exists in the galaxy." Ward studied the peaceful world one last time. "Then allow me to make a promise." "What promise?" Ward looked toward the stars. "If humanity ever becomes strong enough, we will protect you." Admiral Renata Cole stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Resolute Dawn. Before her stretched the entire Varkari Dominion fleet, over 200 warships. But behind her, 300 Terran vessels floated in silent formation. Humans had changed since the days of the Aurora Reach. They were no longer explorers, struggling to survive. They were a power. Cole opened a broadcast channel. Her voice traveled across the battlefield. "This is Admiral Renata Cole of the Terran Defense Fleet." The Varkari commander sneered through the comm channel. "You are interfering with Dominion resource reclamation." Cole didn't react. Instead, she said calmly, 37 years ago a Terran colony ship was stranded near this system." Silence spread across the channel. "The Elyndari sheltered our people, fed them, protected them." Cole's voice hardened. "They asked for nothing in return." The Varkari commander laughed. "And you crossed half the galaxy to repay a charity." Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "No." Her voice became colder. "We crossed half the galaxy to repay a debt." She leaned closer to the microphone. "Humanity never forgets a favor." The Terran fleet moved instantly. Strike fighters launched. From carriers like swarms of steel birds, railgun cannons thundered. Across space, missiles ignited the void with streaks of blue fire. The Varkari fleet was powerful, but they had made one fatal mistake. They believed humanity was still weak. Within minutes, their formation collapsed. Terran destroyers sliced through their lines with surgical precision. Mass drivers shattered armored hulls. Energy lances pierced command ships. The Dominion fleet began to retreat, but the Terrans pursued relentlessly, because this battle wasn't about conquest. It was about keeping a promise. Hours later, silence returned to Elyndara's orbit. The Varkari fleet was gone. Admiral Cole's flagship descended slowly toward the crystal oceans below. For the first time in decades, humans returned to Elyndara. Crowds of Elyndari gathered along the shoreline. Among them stood Elder Ashel Odea, now, but still radiant. Cole approached her quietly. Ashel studied the human admiral. "You came very far for us." Cole smiled softly. "Yes." Hale asked the question she already knew the answer to. Why? Cole looked toward the peaceful sky, then replied gently, because, when humanity was lost and helpless, your people chose kindness. She extended her hand in greeting, and humans never forget kindness. The waves shimmered beneath the setting sun, and across the galaxy. A quiet truth began spreading from world to world. Never underestimate a species that remembers its debts. Kethara Station had seen many strange things. Smugglers, fleeing patrol ships, corporate warlords arguing over docking fees, even the occasional pirate battle erupting in its crowded orbit. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever caused the kind of fear that spread across the station that morning, because something enormous had just appeared above the station. The alarms began first, a deep mechanical wail, echoing through every corridor and marketplace. Red warning lights flickered on across the outer docking rings. Then the sensors confirmed what everyone was already seeing through the observation windows. A human dreadnought had emerged from hyperspace. The ship looked less like a vessel and more like a floating mountain of steel. Its armored hull stretched 4 kilometers. Rows of rail cannons lined its sides like silent thunder waiting to erupt. Massive engines burned with a cold blue glow, illuminating the darkness of space behind it. Every ship docked at Kethara Station suddenly seemed small, helpless, and the worst part, the dreadnought had arrived alone. A ship that large didn't need escorts. It was the fleet. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Smugglers scrambled to erase. Cargo record station authorities rushed to emergency command centers. Because in the galaxy, when a human dreadnought arrived without warning, it usually meant something terrible was about to happen. Then the broadcast began. A calm voice echoed across every channel on the station. Attention citizens of Kethara Station. The voice paused. Professional. Controlled. Military. This is Commander Daniel Reyes of the Terran Defense Fleet. People held their breath. Reyes continued. We are looking for an individual. Another pause. Then the sentence that left the entire station confused. Does anyone here remember a food vendor named Taro? Deep in the lower commercial levels of Kethara Station, life moved at a slower pace. The wealthy traders rarely visited this area. The lights flickered constantly. Old pipes dripped condensation from the ceiling, but the smell of cooking broth filled the narrow corridors with a comforting warmth. At the center of a small marketplace stood a stall, barely larger than a closet. A faded sign hung above it. Kel's noodles behind the counter stood Taro. Kel. An elderly alien whose species resembled slender, amphibious beings with pale green skin and wide golden eyes. Taro stirred a large pot of soup slowly. He had been doing this for nearly 40 years. Same stall. Same recipe, same routine. He never expected to become famous. He certainly never expected to hear his name broadcast from a Terran warship. His granddaughter burst into the stall, breathless. Grandfather. Taro looked up calmly. What is it, Mira? The humans? They're asking for you. Taro blinked slowly. Humans? Yes. A huge warship is above the station. Taro frowned. Why would a human warship want an old noodle vendor? But then a memory surfaced. A faint one. From many years ago, a rainy night. A wounded stranger collapsing beside his stall. And suddenly, Taro felt a strange sense of unease. Kethara Station had always been rough around the edges. But 25 years ago, it was far worse. Back then the station was controlled by criminal syndicates. Entire corridors belonged to gangs. And travelers who wandered into the wrong place often disappeared. That night, rain leaked through broken ceiling pipes and dripped into the marketplace. Most stalls had already closed. Only Taro remained open. He was cleaning bowls when he heard something, a soft thud. He looked down the alley beside his stall. Man stumbled into the light. Tall. Human. His clothes were torn, his face bruised and bloodied, and he collapsed onto the floor. Taro hurried over. The man was barely conscious. His voice came out as a whisper. Food. Taro hesitated. He wasn't wealthy. Some days his stall barely earned enough to buy ingredients for the next day. Giving away food meant losing money. But he looked into the stranger's eyes and saw desperation. So Taro returned to the stall and quietly prepared a bowl of noodles. Steam rose gently from the broth. He placed the bowl beside the human. The man ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days. When he finished, he looked up at Taro. Thank you. Taro waved his hand dismissively. No payment needed. The man laughed weakly. You might regret saying that someday. Taro shrugged. Kindness rarely causes regret. A few hours later, loud footsteps echoed down the corridor. Taro immediately recognized the sound. Gang enforcers. 3 armored criminals entered the marketplace. One of them slammed a rifle against a table. "We're looking for a human." Taro kept cleaning bowls. "I have not seen one." The gang leader narrowed his eyes. "Someone reported a wounded human entering this sector." Taro remained calm. "There are many travelers on this station." The criminals searched the nearby corridors, but they never checked beneath the floor panels of Taro's stall, because that's where the human was hiding. Taro had quietly lifted the floor plating and concealed him. After the gang finally left, Taro helped the stranger climb out. "You should leave the station," Taro said. "They will keep searching." The human nodded. "I just need to reach a communications relay." Taro guided him through hidden maintenance corridors to an old transmitter tower. Before leaving, the human turned back. "My name is Evan Maddox." Taro chuckled. "You should eat more often." Evan Maddox. Evan smiled faintly. "I'll remember that." Then he disappeared into the darkness. Taro assumed he would never see the human again now. 25 years later, Taro stood inside a Terran shuttle flying toward the dreadnought in orbit. His granddaughter sat beside him nervously. "Grandfather, are we in trouble?" Taro wasn't sure, but something told him this wasn't about punishment. The shuttle docked with the enormous warship. When the doors opened, Taro stepped into a command deck larger than his entire marketplace. Rows of human officers worked quietly at glowing consoles. At the center of the room stood Commander Daniel Reyes. Tall, broad, shouldered. Calm. Reyes approached slowly. "Are you Taro Kel?" Taro nodded. "Yes." Reyes smiled warmly. "Then I finally get to meet you." Taro tilted his head. "Why would a Terran commander want to meet me?" Reyes gestured toward a large holographic display. An image appeared. A familiar face. Older now. Wearing formal diplomatic robes. Evan Maddox, but the title beneath his name was far more surprising. Ambassador of Earth to the Galactic Council. Taro stared in disbelief. "That starving traveler became this." Reyes chuckled. "Yes, and he told us something interesting." "What?" Reyes folded his arms. "He said the most important moment of his life happened at a tiny noodle stall on Kethara Station." Taro shook his head slowly. "I only gave him food." Reyes smiled. "That bowl of noodles saved the future ambassador of humanity." But the dreadnought had not come just to thank. Taro. Reyes activated another hologram. Images of Kethara Station appeared. Crime. Statistics. Corporate exploitation. Smuggling networks. The station had become a lawless marketplace where powerful syndicates ruled everything. Reyes spoke calmly. Ambassador Maddox told the Terran Council something else. "What was that?" Taro asked. "He said this station once showed humanity kindness, even when it had nothing to gain." Reyes looked around the room. "And humans repay kindness." Within hours, the Terran fleet began operations. Criminal syndicate ships were disabled without warning. Corporate security forces attempting resistance were disarmed instantly. Hidden smuggling bases were dismantled. The transformation was swift, precise, and overwhelming to the first time in decades. Kethara Station was free. 6 months later, the lower marketplace of Kethara looked completely different. The corridors were brighter, cleaner, peaceful. Trade. Ships from dozens of civilizations now visited the station. At the center of the marketplace stood a much larger restaurant. The sign still read, "Kel's Noodles," but now customers filled every table. Travelers from across the galaxy lined up to taste the famous broth. Commander Reyes visited one afternoon. Taro greeted him warmly. "I wish I had given that young man a larger bowl." Reyes laughed. "Taro, that single bowl helped shape the future of our species." Taro looked around the thriving station. The laughter of travelers, the sound of life returning, all from one act of kindness. Reyes nodded. "Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest ripples." Taro stirred the broth slowly, steam rising into the warm air of the restaurant. And somewhere beyond the stars, Ambassador Evan Maddox continued representing humanity among the greatest civilizations of the galaxy. All because once, on a forgotten station, a tired traveler received a simple bowl of noodles, and in the quiet language of humanity, that meant a debt had been created and humans never forget their debts. The battlefield had long since gone silent. Smoke drifted across the ruined landscape of Zerath Prime's outer colony, turning the sunset sky into a haze of orange and gray. Broken war machines lay scattered across the ground, like metallic skeletons. The war had ended hours ago, but for one man, the nightmare was just beginning. Kneeling in the middle of a destroyed landing field was a human pilot. His name was Marcus Hale. His flight suit was torn and scorched. His helmet lay shattered nearby, and standing behind him was a squad of alien soldiers from the Zerathi Empire. Their armor glowed faintly with violet energy lines. Tall, reptilian warriors with hardened scales and glowing yellow eyes towed them. Humans were nothing more than a minor nuisance in the galaxy, a species that had expanded too quickly into territories claimed by stronger powers. The Zerathi had crushed human resistance in this sector weeks ago. Marcus Hale was simply the last survivor of his squadron. One of the soldiers stepped forward, raising a plasma rifle. Prisoner identified, the soldier announced. Species, human. Sentence, immediate execution. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He had always known this moment might come. Human pilots in this war rarely survived capture. The soldier behind him charged the weapon. The barrel hummed softly. Marcus waited for the end, but then another voice cut through the silence. Stand down. The squad turned. A Zerathi officer approached slowly across the battlefield. His armor was darker than the others, marked with the insignia of command. Captain Iroth. He studied the human prisoner carefully. Marcus lifted his head. Their eyes met. Iroth spoke calmly. Why did you fight so hard for a war you could not win? Marcus chuckled weakly. Humans are stubborn. Iroth tilted his head slightly. I've noticed. The execution soldier raised the rifle again. Captain, shall we proceed? Iroth looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked everyone present. Release him. The soldiers froze. Captain Juan asked. Iroth's voice remained steady. You heard me? This prisoner is no threat. The soldier hesitated, but Command Orders Iroth stepped closer. And I am your command here. Reluctantly, the squad lowered their weapons. Marcus blinked in confusion. You're letting me go. Iroth crouched slightly so they were eye level. Tell me something, human. Marcus waited. If our positions were reversed, would you spare me? Marcus considered the question. Then he shrugged. Honestly. Iroth nodded. Probably not. The Zerathi soldiers tensed, but Iroth laughed quietly. Good. I prefer honesty. He stood up and turned away. There is a transport departing in 20 minutes. Marcus stared at him. You expect me to just walk away? Iroth looked over his shoulder. Yes. Why? Iroth paused. Because this war is foolish. The captain's voice lowered slightly. And because someone should prove mercy still exists in this galaxy. Marcus slowly stood. For a moment, he wasn't sure what to say. Finally, he simply nodded. I won't forget this. Iroth gave a faint smile. I doubt we will ever meet again. Human. Neither of them knew how wrong he was. Years passed. The war between humanity and the Zerathi Empire eventually ended in a tense stalemate. Borders shifted. Treaties were signed. But resentment lingered. Between the two species, Marcus Hale returned to Earth. He was promoted, decorated, and eventually placed in command of one of humanity's newest warships. The TD's Horizon Vanguard. Humanity was changing. The species that had once struggled to defend itself was growing. Stronger, smarter, more united. And Marcus never forgot the moment on that battlefield. The moment someone who should have been his enemy chose mercy instead. He kept a small note in his personal journal. A reminder. One day, I will repay that debt. 20-3 years later. The galaxy faced a nightmare far worse than the Zerathi Empire ever had been. Civilization known as the Core Dominion. Unlike most empires, the Core didn't conquer worlds. They erased them. Entire star systems disappeared in their wake. Their ships resembled enormous black fortresses covered in jagged weapon arrays. Their armies showed no mercy. And now, the Core fleets had reached Zerathi territory. Planet after planet fell. Zerathi warships fought bravely, but were overwhelmed. Their defenses collapsed within weeks. On the capital world of Zerath Prime, panic spread through the streets. The once empire that had dominated dozens of star systems now faced extinction. The Core Dominion prepared their final assault. Orbital bombardment. Platforms surrounded the planet. Thousands of weapons aimed at the surface, and there was no fleet left to stop them. Deep in orbit above Zerath Prime, Core commanders prepared the attack. A massive war fortress drifted near the planet's atmosphere. Energy cannons hummed as they charged. The extermination of the Zerathi would begin within minutes. Then the sensors screamed. Hyperspace signatures detected. The Core commander turned slowly. How many? The sensor officer hesitated. Over 300. Space tore open like fabric splitting apart. Warships poured from hyperspace. Sleek silver hulls dot blue engine trails, the insignia of Earth gleaming across their sides. The Terran Defense Fleet had arrived. Across every communication channel, a human voice echoed through space.com. Steady. Unmistakably confident. This is Admiral Marshole of the Terran Defense Fleet. The Corps commander snarled. Human interference will not alter the outcome of this conflict. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Horizon Vanguard, watching the Corps armada. Perhaps not, he replied. But I'm not here to change the outcome. The Corps commander frowned. Then why are you here? Marcus paused, and somewhere far below on the surface of Zerath Prime, an aging Zerathi officer watched the sky from a command bunker. Captain Erith, older now, scarred by years of war. He listened, as the human admiral continued speaking. 23 years ago, Marcus said slowly, a Zerathi officer spared the life of a captured human pilot. Erith's eyes widened. That officer disobeyed orders to show mercy. Marcus leaned closer to the microphone, and humans repay mercy with loyalty. The Terran fleet attacked. Fighter squadrons surged forward like metallic storms. Rail cannons thundered. Across space, human warships maneuvered with terrifying precision. The Core Dominion had conquered dozens of civilizations, but they had never fought humans before, and humans fought differently. They fought for strategy, for survival, for promises. The battle raged for hours. Core dreadnoughts exploded under relentless bombardment. Terran destroyers carved through enemy formations, and slowly, the Core armada began to collapse. When the last fortress ship finally retreated into hyperspace, the skies above Zerath Prime were quiet. Once again, days later, a Terran shuttle landed on the capital world. Marcus Hole stepped out. Zerathi soldiers watched cautiously as he approached their command bunker. Inside waited Captain Eroth. The two old warriors stood face to face again. Eroth studied the human carefully. You came very far to repay a single act of mercy. Marcus smiled faintly. It wasn't just mercy. It was hope. Eroth tilted his head. Hope. Marcus nodded. You proved that even enemies can choose compassion. He extended his hand. And humans, remember compassion. Eroth looked at the offered hand for a moment. Then he grasped it. Outside, the sky above Zerath Prime shimmered with Terran warships standing guard across the galaxy. News of the battle spread quickly. And with it came a quiet realization. Humanity might fight fiercely. Humanity might be dangerous, but humanity never forgot a debt, especially not one paid in mercy. There was a time when humanity believed the stars would welcome them. When the first Terran exploration fleets left Earth, their ships carried scientists, dreamers, and pioneers who believed the galaxy would be full of opportunity. But the galaxy had other ideas. The war began suddenly, without warning, without negotiation. An alien empire known as the Krell Ascendancy emerged from the outer sectors with one simple philosophy. Only the strong deserve to exist. Human colonies were young, then scattered across fragile settlements and poorly defended outposts. The Krell attacked them first. Entire systems fell within days. Cities burned beneath orbital bombardments. Refugee ships fled in every direction, carrying millions of terrified survivors. Human warships fought desperately to buy time. But the truth was brutal. Humanity wasn't ready for a war on that scale. The Terran fleets were shattered. Their defensive lines collapsed. And within a few terrifying months, billions of humans became refugees in space. The remnants of the human fleet drifted through the Orion frontier like wounded animals. Thousands of civilian transports traveled alongside the surviving military escorts. Food supplies were running low. Fuel reserves were nearly gone. The refugees had escaped the Krell, but now they faced a different enemy. Extinction. Inside the flagship TDS Solus, Admiral Jonathan Mercer stared at the tactical map floating above the command table. Every nearby star system had already rejected their request for asylum. Some civilizations feared the Krell retaliation. Others simply didn't care. The galaxy was vast, but compassion was rare. A communications officer spoke quietly. Admiral, long-range sensors have detected a habitable planet in the Vela system. Mercer leaned forward. Population, primitive, pre-interstellar technology level, minimal orbital capability. Mercer sighed. We can't take their world knows, sir. The officer hesitated. But we could ask. Mercer closed his eyes. Briefly, human pride had already been broken by war. Now they were begging for shelter from strangers who barely understood space travel. But there was no other option. Open communications. The world called Valora was unlike anything the human refugees had ever seen. From orbit, the planet appeared as a swirling canvas of emerald jungles and bright blue rivers. Gigantic trees stretched kilometers into the sky. Floating islands drifted slowly through the atmosphere. Bioluminescent plants glowed softly beneath the thick cloud layers. It was a living world, ancient, wild, beautiful, and home to a peaceful species known as the Valorians. The Valorians were tall, slender beings with smooth silver skin and long, luminous eyes. Their civilization was simple. They lived in cities, grown from living wood and crystal vines. They studied nature instead of conquering it. War had never touched their world until the day thousands of Terran ships appeared in their skies. The council gathered beneath a massive tree whose branches spread across an entire valley. The ancient structure served as both government chamber and sacred sanctuary. Holographic projections of the Terran fleet shimmered above the council floor. Thousands of vessels, millions of disparate people. One counselor spoke nervously. If we allow them to land, their enemies may follow. Another added quietly, they are warriors. Their conflicts could destroy our world. At the center of the council sat Elyndara, the oldest Valorian. Alive, she studied the projection silently. Then she spoke. Show me the human transmission again. The recording played. Admiral Mercer stood before a simple camera aboard the Solace. He looked exhausted, his uniform torn, his voice calm, but heavy with desperation. We are refugees of a war we cannot win. Mercer paused before continuing. We ask only for a temporary shelter. If you refuse, we will understand. Sarai noticed something unusual. The human admiral never begged. He simply asked and waited. The council members argued for hours. Finally, Sarai raised her hand. The chamber fell silent. Kindness is rarely safe, she said slowly, but it is always necessary. She turned to the council. We will welcome them. The first Terran transports descended into the jungles of Valora. Millions of refugees stepped onto alien soil. Families who had lost everything. Children who had never seen a world without warships. In the sky, the Valorians greeted them with quiet curiosity. They shared food, medicine, land, to build temporary settlements. The humans expected suspicion instead. They found compassion. Human engineers worked alongside Valorian builders to create refugee cities in the jungle valleys. Doctors treated both species. Children from both worlds played together beneath the glowing forest canopies. For the first time since the war began, humanity felt safe. One evening, Admiral Mercer stood beside Elyndara near a glowing river. The jungle hummed with strange nocturnal life. Mercer spoke softly. You've risked your entire civilization helping us. Sarai tilted her head. Would your species not do the same? Mercer hesitated. Then he smiled sadly. I hope we would. Sarai looked up at the stars. Then perhaps the galaxy still has hope. Years passed. The Krell ascendancy eventually turned their attention toward other regions of the galaxy. The war ended without a clear victor. Humanity survived. But it survived because Valora gave them a chance to recover. Human scientists rebuilt their fleets. Human colonies slowly re-emerged across distant sectors, and eventually, the Terran refugees left Hale right before departing. Admiral Mercer returned to the council chamber. He bowed respectfully before Elyndara. You saved our species. Sarai smiled gently. You saved yourselves. Mercer shook his head. No. Then, he made a promise. One day humanity will become strong again. Sarai nodded. And when that day comes, Mercer looked toward the stars. We will remember who sheltered us when we had nothing. 300 years passed. The galaxy changed. Empires rose and fell. Trade networks expanded across thousands of systems, and humanity had become something new. The Terran Federation was now one of the most powerful alliances in the Orion Arm. Their fleets were legendary, their technology advanced, their influence vast, but on the quiet jungle world of Valora, time had moved slowly. The Valorians remained peaceful. They had never built warships. Never conquered neighbors. They simply lived among their forests. Until a new empire arrived. The Draxian Mining Consortium discovered Valora's greatest secret. Deep beneath the jungle crust lay massive deposits of quantum fusion minerals, materials capable of powering entire civilizations. The Draxians didn't care about their Valorians. They only cared about profit. Their mining fleet entered orbit without permission. Gigantic excavation. Ships descended toward the surface. Valorian leaders protested peacefully. The Draxians responded with orbital bombardment warnings. Entire forests began burning. Ancient cities were destroyed by automated mining drones. The Valorians had no way to fight back. Their world was about to become a quarry. As the Draxian fleet prepared their final bombardment, their sensors detected something unexpected. A hyperspace rupture. Then another. Then dozens more ships emerged from the distortion. Like metallic giants, hundreds of them. Sleek silver holes reflecting the distant sunlight. The insignia on their armor was unmistakable. A blue sphere surrounded by stars. The symbol of Terran space. The largest fleet the Draxians had ever seen surrounded Valora in seconds. A transmission echoed across every channel. "This is Admiral Elena Ward of the Terran Defense Fleet." Her voice was calm, cold. "You are conducting unauthorized resource extraction on a protected world." The Draxian commander scoffed. "And who exactly protects this planet?" There was a pause. Then Ward answered, "Humanity." The Draxian fleet attempted to resist, but they had made a catastrophic mistake. They believed Valora was UND, FE and DED. They had not expected the Terran Federation. Human carriers deployed fighter squadrons that swarmed the mining ships. Rail cannons shattered their escort frigates. Massive Terran dreadnoughts cut through the enemy fleet with terrifying efficiency. Within hours, the Draxian armada was gone. Some ships were destroyed. The rest fled into hyperspace. Valora was safe. Days later, Terran shuttles descended into the jungles of Valora. Human soldiers stepped onto the planet. Their ancestors once called home, waiting for them near the ancient council tree were the descendants of the Valorian elders. Admiral Elena Ward approached slowly. She knelt before the oldest Valorian present. "My ancestor was Admiral Jonathan Mercer," she said. "He told us everything about this world." The elder studied her carefully. "Your people have grown very strong." Ward nodded. Double quotes, "Yes." The elder asked quietly, "Why did you come back after all this time?" Ward looked up at the glowing jungle canopy. Then she smiled. "Because centuries ago your people sheltered us when we had nowhere else to go." Her voice grew firm. "And humanity never forgets kindness." Above them, hundreds of Terran warships stood guard in the skies of Valora, across the galaxy. The story spread quickly, and civilizations everywhere learned a simple truth. Helping humanity, when they are weak, may one day give you the strongest ally in the stars. The Galactic Tribunal Chamber was built to intimidate. Towering pillars of black alloy stretched toward a ceiling so high, it disappeared into shadows. Rows of alien judges sat upon elevated platforms arranged in a circle, watching the center of the chamber like silent gods. In the middle of that enormous hole stood a single human. His name was Commander Adrian Vale, and according to the charges presented to the tribunal, he had just committed the largest act of destruction in modern galactic history. 3 months earlier, an entire pirate empire known as the Crimson Marauders had vanished. Over 100 pirate fleets. Hundreds of hidden bases. Dozens of fortified asteroid strongholds. All of them destroyed, every last one. And the evidence pointed to one man, Commander Vale. The tribunal's chief judge leaned forward, its full luminous eyes glowing faintly. "Commander Adrian Vale, of the Terran Defense Fleet," the judge said in a deep, echoing voice. "You stand accused of exterminating an entire civilization without authorization from the Galactic Council." The chamber murmured. Vale stood calmly, his hands folded behind his back. "We did not exterminate a civilization," he replied quietly. "We ended a threat." Another judge spoke sharply. "The Crimson Marauders were a recognized political faction." Vale almost laughed. "They were pirates." The judge's voice hardened. "And yet, Commander, your fleet destroyed them completely." Val did not deny it, because they were murdering innocent worlds. The judges exchanged glances. "Your evidence for these claims is insufficient," one of them said. Vale knew what that meant. Without proof, humanity could face sanctions, trade restrictions, even military containment. The tribunal prepared to deliver judgment. But then, the chamber doors opened, and a voice echoed through the hall. "I can provide the proof." The entire tribunal chamber turned toward the entrance. A small figure slowly walked inside. An alien thin fragile looking, wearing the robes of a scientific researcher. Gasps spread through the audience. One judge spoke carefully. Identify yourself. The alien bowed slightly. I am Dr. Laris, xenobiologist and former research consultant to the Crimson Marauder territories. The chamber grew quiet, because that meant one thing. He had lived among the pirates. The judge tilted its head and said, "Why have you come here today?" Dr. Laris glanced briefly toward Commander Vale, then back to the judges. To tell the truth, years earlier, humanity's presence in the galaxy had been fragile. Their colonies were young, their fleets small, their influence limited. Many larger civilizations ignored them. Others quietly waited for them to fail, and some saw humans as easy prey. The Crimson Marauders were among the worst. They were not a single species. They were a coalition of criminals, smugglers, and mercenaries who controlled dozens of lawless systems. Their fleets raided trade convoys and undefended colonies. Human settlements were particularly attractive targets, because humans rarely had enough ships to defend themselves. Dr. Laris had been studying alien ecosystems on a remote asteroid station when he first encountered them. At first, the pirates seemed merely greedy, but soon he learned the truth. They were monsters. One of the tribunal judges spoke. "Dr. Laris explained your involvement with the Marauders." Laris nodded slowly. "They forced me to work for them." "Doing what?" "Analyzing biological resources on captured worlds." A hologram appeared above the courtroom floor. Images of a devastated human colony filled the air. Burned buildings, destroyed habitats, bodies scattered across the ground. The chamber grew silent. "This colony was called New Horizon," Laris explained, quietly. "Population, 40,000 humans." One judge frowned. "What happened to them?" Laris looked down briefly. "The pirates slaughtered them." The courtroom erupted into whispers. The judge raised a hand for silence. "You are claiming the Marauders committed genocide?" Laris nodded. Double quotes. "Yes. But why?" "Because they believed humans were too weak to matter." Laris continued speaking. "I could not stop them directly. The pirates would have executed me. So instead," the judge said carefully, "you chose to come forward now." Laris shook his head. "No. I helped someone else." He looked toward Commander Vale again. "Years ago, a Terran scout ship entered Marauder territory. The hologram shifted to show an old Terran reconnaissance vessel. It was supposed to gather intelligence on pirate movements. But it was discovered. The pirates planned to destroy the ship, but Laris made a decision. He secretly transmitted a message to the human vessel. Coordinates. Fleet numbers. Weak points in the pirate defenses. The scout ship escaped, and the information eventually reached Terran Command. The judges leaned forward. "And you are saying this information allowed humanity to defeat the pirates?" Laris nodded. "Yes." But his voice became softer. "I did not realize how important that moment would become." Years later, the Crimson Marauders returned stronger than ever. They had expanded their territory. Their fleets grew larger. Their brutality even worse. Human colonies were attacked again. Entire systems were raided. Trade routes collapsed. And finally, humanity had enough. Commander Adrian Vale was placed in charge of a special task force. His orders were simple: end the threat permanently. The tribunal chamber, filled with new holographic images, battle recordings, Terran fleets emerging from hyperspace, pirate bases exploding, hidden asteroid strongholds collapsing. "Commander," Vale spoke for the first time in several minutes, "we warned them to stop." He looked at the judges. They laughed. The images continued. Human warships, systematically dismantling the pirate empire. Fleet after fleet destroyed. Stronghold after stronghold captured. The judges watched the final recording. A massive pirate headquarters deep inside a nebula. The last fortress of the Crimson Marauders. Vale's fleet surrounded it. A message was sent: surrender. The pirates responded with weapons fire. The fortress was destroyed. The pirate empire ended that day. Dr. Laris stepped forward again. "You see only the destruction," he told the tribunal. "But you do not see the reason behind it." He activated one last hologram. Dozens of human colonies appeared, each marked with a red symbol. These worlds were attacked by the Marauders. Another projection appeared. Population numbers, millions of people, dead. The pirates believed humans were weak enough to erase without consequences. The chamber was silent now. No whispers, no murmurs, just the weight of the truth. Laris looked at the judges. Commander Vale did not destroy a civilization. He ended a nightmare. The chief judge slowly leaned back in its chair. Its glowing eyes studied Commander Vale. "For years," it said quietly, The galaxy has questioned humanity's rise. Some feared your species would become dangerous. Vale remained silent. The judge continued. But today, we have learned something important. The chamber listened carefully. Humans do not forget cruelty. A pause, and they do not ignore injustice. The judge raised his hand. All charges against Commander Adrian Vale are dismissed. The tribunal erupted into conversation. Vale turned toward Dr. Laris. Why did you risk everything to testify? Laris smiled faintly. Because once, I helped a human scout ship escape. Vale nodded slowly. Yes. And humans repay their debts. Outside the tribunal chamber, news of the verdict spread across the galaxy, and with it came a new understanding. Humanity could be merciful, humanity could be diplomatic. But if someone threatened innocent lives, humans would not hesitate. And once they decided to end a threat, they would finish the job. The sky above the desert world of Zerathi burned like molten copper. Two fleets were fighting high above the planet's thin atmosphere. Streaks of light tore across the sky as ships exchanged railgun fire and plasma beams. Explosions flashed like miniature suns. Fragments of destroyed vessels rained down through the clouds. On the surface, the small alien settlements of Zerathi watched in fear. They didn't understand the war happening above them. They only knew one thing. Something terrible was falling. A flaming object screamed through the sky and crashed into the desert dunes miles from the nearest village. The impact sent a shockwave of sand across the barren landscape, and inside that burning wreckage, a human soldier was barely alive. His name was Lieutenant Marcus Hale, and if the Zerathi authorities discovered him first, he would not survive the night. Zerathi was a quiet world on the edge of civilized space. Its people were a peaceful species who rarely interacted with outsiders. Tall and slender, with smooth pale skin and large reflective eyes, the Zerathi evolved. In harsh desert environments where survival depended on caution, they had heard rumors about the larger galaxy. About empires. Wars. Invasions. And most frightening of all, humans. Many traders described humanity as unpredictable, dangerous as species, capable of great kindness, but also terrible destruction. So when the village sensors detected a crashed ship in the desert, the elders immediately issued a warning. No one approached the wreckage. If the pilot is alive, the authorities will handle it. The villagers obeyed. Everyone except one curious child. Her name was Lyra. She was only 12 cycles old. Too young to understand the dangers adults feared, but old enough to follow her curiosity. When she saw the burning wreckage glowing in the desert night, she couldn't ignore it. Something inside her felt wrong. Someone might be hurt while the village slept. Lyra slipped away into the dunes. The wind howled across the desert as she walked. By the time she reached the crash site, the flames had mostly died. The wreckage of the escape pod lay in sand. Metal panels were twisted open from the impact. And inside, a massive figure moved weakly. Lyra froze. The stories were true. It was a human lieutenant. Marcus Hale barely remained conscious. His vision blurred. His chest armor was cracked. Several warning lights on his suit flickered dangerously. The crash had nearly killed him. Then he heard footsteps in the sand. Hale forced his eyes open. Standing outside, the shattered pod was a small alien girl staring at him with wide eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hale whispered weakly, "Hey, kid." Lyra hesitated. Humans were supposed to be terrifying, but this one looked broken. "Are you dying?" she asked quietly. Hale gave a faint smile. "Working on not doing that." He tried to stand. Pain shot through his body. He collapsed again. Lyra stepped closer. "You cannot stay here," she said. "The desert patrols will come." Hale nodded slowly. "I figured." Lyra looked around nervously. If the authorities found a human soldier, they might assume Zerathi was aiding one side of the war. That could bring invasion. Punishment. Or worse, helping him was dangerous. Very dangerous. But leaving him to die felt wrong. After a long moment, she made her decision. "Come with me," she said. Getting Hale back to the village was difficult. He was nearly 3 times Lyra's size. But Zerathi children were used to navigating desert terrain. Using an old cargo sled, she slowly dragged him across the dunes under the cover of darkness. Hours later, they reached a small storage cave near the edge of the settlement. It was rarely used, perfect for hiding someone. Lyra brought him water first. Hale drank greedily. "Best drink I've ever had," he muttered. Lyra studied him carefully. "You are a soldier?" Hale nodded. "Terran Defense Fleet. Why were you fighting above our world?" Hale sighed. Bad people chasing worse people. Lyra didn't fully understand, but she understood pain. And right now, this soldier needed help. Over the next several days, Lyra secretly cared for the injured human. She brought food from the village, kitchens. Medical supplies stolen from her father's clinic. Hale slowly recovered. He taught Lyra basic Terran words. She taught him about Karethi culture that talked about their worlds. About stars. About dreams. For the first time since the crash, Hale felt something unexpected. Peace. One evening, as the desert sun faded behind the dunes, Lyra asked him a question. Why do humans fight so much? Hale stared out at the horizon. Sometimes we fight because we have to, but sometimes, he paused, we fight because someone else can't. Lyra considered this carefully. Then she asked another question. Will your people come looking for you? Hale nodded slowly. They never leave soldiers behind. High above Karethi, the war had ended. The Terran fleet had won the battle, but one pilot was still missing. Lieutenant Marcus Hawley. Search ships scanned the planet for days, but Karethi authorities refused permission for ground operations. They didn't want foreign militaries landing on their world. Eventually, the Terrans were forced to leave. Hale realized something difficult. His people might never find him. One night he told Lyra the truth. I may have to stay here forever. Lyra looked surprised. Would that be terrible? Hale laughed softly. Compared to dying in a desert crash. Not really. But both of them knew something. The secret couldn't last forever. One afternoon, village patrols noticed unusual footprints near the storage cave. Large footprints. Too large for Karethi. They followed the trail. Lyra saw them coming. She ran to the cave. Soldier, she whispered urgently. They are coming. Hale grabbed his gear, but he was still weak. Running wasn't possible. Within minutes, the patrol arrived, weapons raised. Their leader stared at Hale in shock. A human. The situation was dangerous. The patrol leader's communicator activated. We have discovered a foreign military pilot. Hale stepped forward slowly. I mean no harm. But Karethi law was strict. Foreign soldiers were not allowed to hide within settlements. The patrol leader turned to Lyra. You helped him. She nodded quietly. The leader sighed. This will create problems. The Karethi council gathered that evening. Some leaders were furious. If the war fleets return, they may believe we aided the Terrans. Others argued differently. This soldier was injured. A child saved his life. The debate lasted hours. Finally, the council reached a decision. The soldier would be returned to Terran space. Quietly, without publicity. Lyra felt relief. Hale would live. But when the transport shuttle arrived the next morning, she suddenly felt something else. Sadness. Hale knelt in front of her before leaving. You saved my life, kid. Lyra tried to smile. Will you forget me? Hale shook his head firmly. Humans don't forget things like that. Then he added, softly, especially favors. 2 decades passed. Lyra grew up. She became a scientist, studying off-world civilizations. Life on Karethi remained peaceful. But one day, their orbital sensors detected something enormous. Hundreds of warships emerging from hyperspace. The Karethi government panicked. Had they accidentally angered a major power? Was an invasion coming? Then the lead ship transmitted a message. This is Admiral Marcus Hale of the Terran Defense Fleet. Lyra froze. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. A massive Terran flagship landed outside the capital city. From it stepped a tall human officer in full admiral uniform. Marcus Hale. He looked older, stronger, but when he saw Lyra standing among the welcoming delegation, he smiled exactly the same way he had years ago in the desert cave. You grew up, he said. Lyra laughed softly. So did you. The Karethi leaders asked carefully. Why has the Terran fleet come here? Hale gestured toward the sky. Because our long-range sensors detected pirate fleets moving toward the system. Gasps spread through the crowd. We are here to ensure Karethi remains safe. The council leader frowned slightly. Why would the Terran Federation protect our world? Hale looked at Lyra. Then he answered simply. Because once, someone from Karethi saved a Terran soldier who fell from the sky. Above them, hundreds of Terran warships now guarded the planet, and every Karethi citizen finally understood something important. Humanity might fight terrifying wars. Humanity might possess dangerous power, but they also remembered kindness, even the smallest act, even from a child. And sometimes, that kindness could earn an entire world the protection of a species that never forgets its debts. There was a time when the Zerath Dominion believed humanity would never become a threat to them. Humans were a young species, a fragile civilization, barely holding together scattered colonies and experimental fleets. The Dominion had ruled their section of the galaxy for centuries, expanding their borders through intimidation, manipulation, and carefully calculated betrayals. And once humanity had trusted them, years earlier, when the Terran Federation was still struggling to establish itself among the stars. The Zerath Dominion had approached them with promises of partnership, trade agreements, military cooperation, protection from pirates and rival empires. To the Terran leaders at the time, it seemed like a lifeline, a powerful ally, offering friendship, so humanity accepted. What they didn't realize was that the Dominion never intended to honor that alliance. The betrayal came during the Battle of Helios Gate. A massive pirate coalition had threatened several human trade systems, and the Terrans requested help from their supposed allies. The Zerath Dominion agreed immediately. Their fleet arrived at Helios Gate alongside the Terran warships. For a brief moment, it looked like a united front. But the moment the pirate fleets entered the system, the Dominion ships withdrew, without warning, without explanation. They simply jumped to hyperspace and left the Terran fleet alone. The pirates attacked immediately. The battle was devastating. Human cruisers were destroyed. Supply ships were torn apart. Entire squadrons vanished in the chaos of plasma, fire and missile storms. The Terrans eventually won, but barely, and the cost was enormous. Thousands of lives lost, ships reduced to drifting, wreckage, and a brutal realization. The Zerath Dominion had never been allies. They had used humanity as bait. When the Terran survivors analyzed the battle recordings, the truth became undeniable. The Dominion had known the pirates were coming. They had known the Terrans would fight, and they had known the Terran fleet would suffer catastrophic losses. But they didn't care, because in their eyes, humanity was expendable. A small civilization that could be sacrificed to weaken pirate forces, while the Dominion stayed safely out of danger. When the news reached Earth, the reaction wasn't rage. It wasn't outrage. It was something far more dangerous. Silence. Humanity didn't declare war. They didn't threaten retaliation. Instead, they remembered. 4 years afterward, Terran diplomats continued speaking with the Zerath Dominion. Trade continued. Official relations remained peaceful, but quietly. Behind the scenes, humanity began preparing for the future. New shipyards were built. Experimental weapons were developed. Fleet doctrines evolved. Human engineers studied every weakness in Dominion warship design, every flaw in their strategy, every assumption they had made about human weakness. And slowly, humanity changed. 2 decades passed. The Zerath Dominion barely thought about humanity anymore. In their minds, the Terrans were still a minor power, useful for trade, harmless in war. So, when Dominion patrols detected a large fleet approaching their border systems one quiet morning, they were confused, because the ships approaching weren't pirate vessels, and they weren't Dominion ships. They were human, hundreds of them. New warships, massive carriers, dreadnoughts, larger than anything humanity had ever built before. The Dominion immediately demanded an explanation. A transmission from the Terran flagship appeared across their communication channels. The face on the screen belonged to Admiral Cassandra Rains, commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. Her voice was calm, controlled, and terrifyingly confident. 20 years ago, at Helios Gate, the Zerath Dominion abandoned its allies during battle. The Dominion commander frowned. That incident was unfortunate, but Rains interrupted him. Over 12,000 Terran soldiers died because of your decision. The Dominion commander scoffed. That was a minor conflict in a chaotic war zone. Rains leaned slightly closer to the camera. For you. Then she continued. But humans remember things differently. The Dominion commander stared at the massive Terran fleet surrounding his border system. You're threatening war over something that happened decades ago. Rains shook her head slowly. No. She paused. We're here to make sure it never happens again. Behind her, the Terran fleet shifted formation. Railgun platforms locked onto Dominion ships. Carrier wings launched hundreds of fighters. Missile batteries powered up across dozens of Terran dreadnoughts. The Dominion commander suddenly realized something terrifying. Humanity had not come here to beg for respect. They had come to demonstrate it, and they had brought enough firepower to make their point impossible to ignore. Rains delivered one final message before ending the transmission. The Terran Federation does not seek revenge. Her expression hardened slightly. But we never forget betrayal. The screen went dark, and from that day forward, the Zerath Dominion never again underestimated humanity, because the galaxy had finally learned an important lesson. Humans might forgive, but they never forget who stood beside them, and who abandoned them when it mattered most.